When I turned 25, I realized I was not a fan of the easy love where two lovers live together in peace and harmony. I often wanted to experience the harsh type of love, one that would keep me worried and on my toes. I agree it was a weird thing to desire, but I liked it, and James was the perfect person for my wild romance fantasies. Do like and subscribe. James suffered from intermittent explosive disorder, or IED, which always made him rage even over little things. At the earlier stage of our relationship, I somehow liked this disorder, and silently hoped he never got better, even though he sometimes hoped to get better with the help of therapy sessions. I often made him miss his therapy sessions till it eventually got worse. Things ultimately fell apart when we went to a friend's birthday party together. We got a birthday invite from a high school classmate, but James was reluctant to attend because of his anger issues. I was able to persuade him to attend. On our way there, he got angry over every little thing. The cars honking too much, pedestrians, and my occasional giggle. We finally arrived at the party. It was a duplex booming with hip-hop jams and multicolored neon lights. We headed upstairs and exchanged pleasantries with other guys. We got ourselves a bottle of beer to start with. I saw Tanya at the poolside and I rushed down with excitement to hug her. We engaged in some catch-up conversations. Suddenly, we heard a scream behind us. A guy had fallen from the balcony. Almost everyone inside hurried outside to see. It was the celebrant, fatally injured. One of the witnesses said the victim was pushed off the balcony by another guy during an argument. He also added that the guy who pushed the victim fled after realizing what he had done. I looked around in search of James, but he was nowhere to be found. It was easy to guess that he had done it, and I left the party before the police came with an ambulance. On my way home, Tanya called to tell me the celebrant was in a coma and that the police were already searching for who pushed him. I pulled over at the front of our apartment and found the door open. I ran inside and saw James shaking in the corner of the living room. Immediately he saw me. He jumped out of the corner and locked the door behind me, then hugged me as he sobbed. I could feel his heart beating fast. "What did you do?" I whispered, now fearing the demon I had built. "He was saying annoying words I couldn't tolerate." His wavering voice made me unable to decode what he was saying, but I paid attention. He started talking about how bad my mental disorder had gone, and advised I stay alone on an island to fix myself permanently. "So?" I asked to make him continue talking. "He was implying I'm mad. Am I? He let go and tugged my hand fiercely. "You're fine. You're all right," I reaffirmed to him, and he took a deep breath, then dallied toward the kitchen to pour himself a glass of wine. He became calm shortly after. "How is he?" he asked in a cold voice. "In a coma," I answered. "It's sad, but he deserved it." James gulped the entire glass, then walked to his room. It was at that moment I realized James had become a menace to society, but it never occurred to me that I might someday become a victim. I got a call from a friend the next morning, wanting to know the time James and I left the party. James overheard me when I was taking the call and signaled that I shouldn't answer. So I pretended the network was bad and hung up. "Don't be foolish," he pointed angrily, but it looked cute to me. "Carter would be fine," and I began, and was interrupted. "If Carter gets fine, he'll tell everyone what happened, and I'll be put in jail or a psychiatric hospital," James explained, and I immediately understood. "Then what's your plan?" I asked. "To make sure he doesn't speak," he said, and I could see the familiar rage in his eyes again. How do you want to go about it?" I asked. "Making sure he never talks again," he answered, and walked out of the house. I feared James would try to commit murder, and I wouldn't want him arrested. I did all I could to persuade him not to go, but he still did. He came back a few hours later and complained he wasn't allowed to enter Carter's ward. "How many years would I get if I'm charged?" "Maybe a minimum of 5 years, or life imprisonment," I replied bluntly, and I could tell it only aggravated his intent to kill Carter. The next morning, while we were having breakfast, I could feel the uneasiness in the conversation and asked him what happened. He was reluctant at first, but later revealed it to me as he sliced an apple. He told me he was questioned by the police yesterday when he went to the hospital. I told him I wasn't at the party and you were the only one. He began to shake. They didn't seem to believe me. I could tell as the two officers stared at each other, but they allowed me to leave. We aren't safe. He could barely finish his statement when I heard a knock on the door. He didn't react to the knock and was lost in his thoughts. I opened the door to find a friend at the party and 2 police officers. "We know he's here," one of them said as they entered. I walked ahead of them, leading them to where James was seated. James quickly apprehended me and placed the knife on my throat, holding me hostage. "Go back!" he shouted at them. But I remained calm, thinking I was just a fake hostage and he wouldn't harm a hair on my head. "Drop the knife and follow us." The police pointed a gun at us. I was more scared of the gun than the knife on my throat. But as soon as I felt relaxed, James pressed the knife on my neck. "I will kill her!" he shouted at the police and kept on pressing the knife to my throat. It wasn't a joke anymore, as blood trickled down my neck to my cleavage. In the nick of time, before he could make a serious cut on my throat, the police officer shot his shoulder and apprehended him. I couldn't deny the responsibility of breeding a monster, and had my share of his brutality. Even before we started dating, I knew Jake was a fitness junkie. Not only was he a member of the local gym, he was also a fitness instructor, and he spent hours upon hours at the gym. He watched everything he ate and counted his calories diligently. It, however, took 2 years of dating to realize just how important fitness was to him. I'd never minded that Jake was ripped, but while he cared too much about staying fit, I was the opposite. I was very much on the thicker side, with big cheeks, belly rolls, and thick arms and thighs. In short, I was fat. But my body shape had never been a problem. I'd been fat when Jake met me, and was duly surprised when he took interest and seemed genuine. There were other girls out there with swimsuit model bods, the kind I imagined every guy hoped for, and they were attracted to him, but he didn't care. He said he loved me, and he did not hold back from showing it. Despite my inhibitions, I fell in love. He told me the shape of my body did not matter. Until it did. Time passed and Jake began to change. I caught him on several occasions looking at me with disgust when he thought I couldn't see him. The way he looked at me, I felt horrible. He began to make subtle jokes about my weight, but I ignored it. He loved me. I was sure he did. Conversations between us steered towards fitness regimens and workout routines and diets, as he not so subtly attempted to tell me that he was displeased by my weight and wanted me to look presentable. It didn't help that I was content with my body, and I turned down his suggestions. He did not like that at all. He stopped holding my hand in public, and when we had sex, which was not as frequent as before, he insisted that the lights be turned off. Eventually, I got fed up and asked if he wanted to break up, as he was not okay with me. The idea did not seem to have occurred to him because he looked at me like I was crazy and discarded the idea. I did not know he had other things in mind. He invited me to his house out of the blue one day and made dinner for the two of us. I had no idea he had added something in my drink until my sight started to blur and I blacked out a moment later. I awoke with an uncomfortable feeling around my wrists and a numbness in my legs to find that I'd been strung up in a basement, his basement. Jake was there too, sitting on the floor and watching me with longing in his eyes. I begged him to let me go, that I was scared, but he shook his head, telling me that it was for my own good, that he was doing this because he loved me. He came up to me and touched me, caressing my cheeks and my arms and whispering to me. His voice was soft and his voice tender, even as he told me that he'd used my phone to tell everyone that would think to look for me that I'd taken a trip somewhere, and assured me that his alibis were ironclad. It was then I realized he didn't care about the slim women, because he wanted to shape me himself, like some twisted creation. For weeks, he starved me, limiting me to one measly meal a day. When I complained, he whipped me. But when he was done, he sat with me, reassuring me that he did it because of love, and I'd be thankful eventually. Weeks turned to months, and I started to submit. I had lost a lot of weight. He let me out of the chains on good behavior, but occasionally whipped me and kept me confined to the basement. One day, he got careless, and I managed to grab hold of a fork when he wasn't looking. I caught him off guard later and rammed it into his neck. I didn't wait to see how much damage I'd caused. I ran away. The police found me out on the street, weak and cold, on the verge of collapsing, and I was taken to a hospital. But when they got back to Jake's house, he was gone, and there was no proof that his basement had been used to hold me hostage for months. Hello, my name is Amanda. That is how each call started. I once worked for a recruitment agency that gathered skilled individuals for companies outsourcing their hiring to other firms. The agency's notice for any job opening was often met with thousands of applications for a single position. The bar for qualification was high. It went without saying that the ensuing procedure to ensure that qualification was rigorous. Potential candidates had to go through 3 tests before they could begin a series of face-to-face interviews. That was where I entered the picture. Like my superior would say back then, I was the beginning of the second wave of the agency's procedure for persons that didn't meet the standards the agency set. This essentially meant that I had the privilege of speaking with several people a day, 10 minutes each. At the end of the session, I had to make flash decisions if those applicants needed to be left on the cutting floor or were good enough to move on to the second interview and hence move on further up the recruitment process. The agency's guide for making this call was based on a combination of things. Number 1 was the applicant's answers to the questions that were given. 2 was their composure while answering those questions. The first one was easy compared to the second, as any nuance of body language was often lost in the grainy transmission that was Zoom calls. I know what you're thinking. I probably quit because the pay was shit. No, the pay wasn't the best, but it was enough for a 25-year-old like me who'd been out of a job for 2 years after college and wanted nothing more than to work from home. As I said, I spent an average of 10 minutes on each call. The calls, once I got used to them, never deviated from the pattern. I asked questions, I listened, I smiled, and ended the call. I opened the spreadsheet, and then typed out a remark under the person's name, then send it, and repeat. I remember the day now just like it was yesterday. I was at home in the corner I'd set up to answer the office calls. I went through the spreadsheet. The next name was Alex. I imputed the number and dialed it. It rang for a while before the person on the other side answered the call. Hello, my name's Amanda. I'll be your interview officer today, I said with a smile. Everything was done with a smile at the agency. Hi, my name's Alex, the man on the other side said. The way he spoke made the words sound a lot more sinister than they were. Hello? Can you hear me? He asked, snapping me out of my thoughts of the black bag object rolled up in the corner. Yes, I can, I replied. Okay, he said. It's nice to finally see you face to face, he replied. I didn't allow myself to think anything of the phrasing, as he was probably just nervous himself, too. I moved past that, asking him about his resume and the gap between his last 2 jobs. Do you know I hate cats? He asked. I was speechless, as I didn't understand the meaning of the non sequitur. Is it just me? Has your face become more beautiful than the last time I saw it? Alex! I shouted. That is highly unprofessional, and I must ask that your answers and comments remain within the confines of the question I ask you. He held up both hands as if to say he was done. At least that's what I interpreted as. I repeated my question. He answered. I asked a few more questions, and he answered. Although I had already lost my patience, the agency required me to ask one last one. This was meant to showcase the creativity of the applicant, or whatever bullshit reason the agency gave for listing that question. Is there anything else you want on the record? No. He nodded his head. Okay, that's the end of the interview. The agency will be in touch with you, I told him. Just right at the moment I was about to click on the end button, the man shouted for me to wait. What is it? I said. I couldn't hide the annoyance in my voice anymore. I miss you, he said. What? I miss you, he repeated. It's been a long while since I saw your face, he said. That was it, I thought to myself. You know what? Fuck you, I said as I ended the call. I moved to the spreadsheet and marked the name Alex with an X. I was about to restart the interview process. I'd spent more than 10 minutes on the call with the creep and needed to get back on track. I looked through the names on the spreadsheet, picked the next name, and called. Before the call could connect again, my phone began ringing. It was a video call from a number that wasn't saved on my phone. I rejected it, but the number called back as quickly as I rejected, and as frequently too. Finally giving in, I answered the call, only to see the now familiar face of Alex staring at me from the phone. How did you get my number? If you continue this, I'll have no option but to disqualify you, and you won't be able to go forward with the job opening. Oh, fuck the job opening, he said with a smile. Not to lose a step, I followed up by threatening to report him to the police. This didn't deter him. He just moved forward to the screen, licked his lips in front of the camera. I was about to end the call again when he asked a question that sent a shiver down my spine. How's Buttercup doing? He asked. I sat there without moving, the thoughts and memory crisscrossing my mind with the speed of a moving train. Buttercup was my cat, you see. She was a gift from my mother before she passed away. I loved that cat more than anything. I went looking for Buttercup after she didn't turn up 2 nights in a row. I didn't find her. One day, I'd gotten a knock on the door and opened the door to find my sweet cat on the ground. She had been shaved, and from the looks of it, she was tortured too. At that moment, my mind flashed back to what he said about hating cats. How do you know about Buttercup? I asked, sure that he had a hand in the death of my cat. Did you kill my cat? I asked again. He laughed again. This time he didn't just stop. He told me that my pants looked nice. The camera on my PC was only capturing my blouse. There was no way he could see below the table. I ended the call, closed my blinds, put off the light, and called the police. After a day or two, they came back with the news that on visiting the house, they found the owner of the house was dead, and had been dead for days. Whoever this Alex was, he must have done it. I quit immediately after that, changed my name, and moved out of state. It had been 3 years now without the specter in my life. I opened the door today after the doorbell had rung, and there was no one there. Just a note on the ground that said, I miss you, from Alex.
Something cold prickled my skin, causing me to jerk awake. The house was pitch black, and I'd been asleep for only a couple of hours tops. I turned frantically in the pitch darkness, searching for my headlamp, trying to understand why my bed felt so hard against my skin. Nothing. More rock hardness. Panic rising through me now, I jerked up, turning around in what was supposed to be my room. But with the night's unpenetrated darkness, it was impossible to see anything, not even myself. The wind rushed against my skin in an unapologetic force, pressing against all parts of me. There was something wrong in the way it felt, something akin to me being naked. I was naked. However foggy the vision of me going to bed was, I'd never gone to bed without clothes. I always had at least underwear on. What on God's green earth is going on? Panic surged through me now, my heart beating fast, as though hoping to tear away from its cage. My feet against the cold ground felt naked, like I was outside. How had this happened? "Hello?" I called out. "Is anybody there?" Greeted only by the silence that basked the night, I reached forward with both hands, trying to feel anything in front of me, my brain scrambling to get a hold of the situation. My hand touched something soft. It was my sleepwear. I had no idea where I was going or how far I'd walked, only that I needed to get out of here. I needed to find out where I was and how this was happening. I'd never sleepwalked in my life, so even now, when all kinds of thoughts from the ordinary to outrageous raced through my mind, it did not cross me that perhaps I was sleepwalking. It had to be a dream anyway, I thought. Something would jump right out of the corner and scare me out of my senses, and I would jerk awake. Then, something did pop out of the corner. The sudden wave of light, followed by an old slow track, probably played in the 90s, popped up in front of me as I moved closer. I jerked back, taken aback. I turned around, taking in my surroundings. I was standing on concrete ground, littered with dirt everywhere, as though it had not been used in ages. Behind me was a road I had no recollection of, and across stood what seemed to be the beginning of a huge forest. I turned back to the building that had saved me from the darkness and nearly slammed into its walls. The huge face of the man on the top and the red painting told me that it was the popular KFC dinner. However, there was no KFC written on anywhere. I could not, for the love of me, understand why they would be this unkept. Why the parking lot was not just empty, but felt abandoned. Perhaps it was the night and my sudden appearance here. Again, something prickled my skin, sending a chill through every part of my body. The sudden recollection that I was in my nightwear in the middle of a popular dinner's parking lot caused me to move. If the lights had just turned on, then there must be someone inside. True to my thoughts, a frail-looking man hauled a tray to the booth at the end of the dining. I cast a terror-filled gaze behind me. I could have sworn I saw a set of eyes staring at me from behind, watching me. I turned again, scanning for any sign of life beyond me, but the brightness of the KFC dinner could only go so far. I rushed in, walking briskly to the man, wrapping my hands around my body, trying to shield myself as well as possible. The man turned to me, the tray on his hand clattering to the ground. "Good God, are you okay, dear?" he asked. "I don't know," I muttered. I opened my mouth to speak again when he said, "Shh, I'll prepare something for you to eat." With that, he urged me to one of the booths, then made back behind the counter. I stared into the blankness of the night, still searching for a clue as to where I was, wondering if my roommate was perhaps searching for me by now. After a while, the man returned, a tray in hand, dropping it on my table. I had no idea what it was, but it smelled so nice. I dived right in, taking a huge chunk of the chicken. Despite the interesting scent of the food, it tasted unlike any KFC chicken I'd ever eaten. The old man stood there watching me. It was only when I had finished the first bit of food I opened my eyes to meet his gaze. His lips were curled in a smile that vanished almost instantly. I thought I'd imagined it. I dropped the half-finished piece back onto the plate, cleared my throat. "Sir, can I use your phone?" I asked. "Oh dear, I haven't had a phone in a very long time," he said, taking the seat to the other side of the booth. I stared at him in confusion. It was the 21st century. How could someone possibly not have a phone right now? "Although, just along the road, there's a filling station. I'm sure they have a phone over there," he said. I rose to my feet instantly, thanking him. As I pulled myself out of the booth, he said something else that made my blood go cold. "Although, the others that went there before paying me never came back," he said. I blinked. I turned to him slowly, my brain wrapping itself around the last bit of what he just said. When I turned to him, he had the same smile on his face. I turned to the door. the familiar jolt of terror rising through me. Sir, I don't. He moved. It was so fast, so fluent and gracious for a man that old, that I barely had time to raise my hand to shield my face before the blade sliced through. Pain shot through my hand as I screamed, blood spilling onto the ground. The man launched again towards me without a second thought. I dashed for the door. I raced as fast as my legs could carry me, not caring that the nightwear could slip off my body, or that I might run head straight to the door if it did not open the other way. I slammed the door, throwing all my weight on it, but the door did not budge. Scrambling for the key or something, I turned to the loud gawking sound, laughter so horrible my skin crawled. I turned to him, pleading with my gaze, but it seemed to make him relish the moments even more. He walked towards me carelessly. I reached for the door handle, fondling it with my hand. Its handle seemed to move freely. I continued pulling, wishing that it would come off as he charged towards me. I moved, ducking the blow. The blade collided with the glass in a deafening sound, and he turned again, this time gritting his teeth as he charged towards me. I needed to do something. I raced back to my booth, picking the tray just in time to slam against his face. The knife clattered to the ground as he clutched his now bleeding nose. I wasted no time reaching for the knife. In one quick move, I stabbed the knife through his neck, blood splashing everywhere in the dining. I stabbed into him some more. My face was drenched in blood, my heart pounding furiously inside my chest. I rose from the floor, letting the knife fall to the ground as I stumbled towards the telephone on the wall. Pulling the phone out, I called the police. After a while, the police arrived, sirens blaring as they stepped out. The police took me to their office, taking my side of the story. It was not until a few days when the detective followed up. She tells me that there have been a series of disappearances similar to mine, and however the bodies had not been found. Pictures of dead girls were found in the basement of the eatery, all of whom concluded the case of a serial killer they had been hunting down.
I've had many jobs throughout my life, and a lot of things happened during those experiences, but I'm not going to get into those right now. I just want to tell you guys about the time I worked as a security guard at a brand new mall. I just moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone and didn't really have any leads when it came to a job. The day I rented my apartment, I went out to buy some stuff for the house. Milk, soda, and some veggies. As I was standing in line at the grocery store, I heard two people talking about this new mall that just opened up at the edge of town. I took my stuff to the house, got into my car, and started driving over there. I wasn't even thinking about a job at that moment. My phone was about to die and my only charging cable was busted. Finally, I arrived and expected to see a sea of people since the mall was new, but it only had a few people there. I went in to look for a store to buy a new charging cable and I stopped at the information desk. The lady was so nice and gave me directions, and I was turning around to go toward the store, and then I saw a help wanted sign right next to her. "Excuse me, are they looking for a new security guard?" I asked while checking out the details written on there. "Oh yes, dear. Are you interested?" "Yes, I just moved to town and I really need a job." She smiled at me and picked up the phone. In no time, another security guard came to greet me. He was tall, thin, but had a warm smile on his face. We chatted for a bit, went to his office, and before my trip to the mall was over, I was hired. The only bad thing was that I had to work the night shift, but I guess it was better than nothing. The next day I woke up pretty late, knowing that I'll be up all night. I made something to eat, the usual. I don't want to bore you with these pointless details. The sun went down at 10 p.m. and I was in front of the mall, excited for my new job. I knew I wouldn't have anything to do, so that's why I brought my iPad with me, so I could be entertained, and I went in and the security guard that hired me was in the locker room. "Listen, it's going to get pretty boring here, so you won't have to worry about doing much, but just be sure to stay awake. I know I have this problem, and that's why I switched to the day shift." He told me, then he showed me around, showed me the monitors that I could use to see what images the cameras were picking up, and he went off. I was all alone in that massive building. The hours went by crazy slow. I watched so many YouTube videos that I got bored of them and decided to walk through the mall. It was something creepy about it. I didn't know why, but I had a feeling that something was watching me. All the lights were on, and even though I had perfect visibility, I couldn't see anyone. "Hello?" I said, as the echo of the place made the word repeat. I felt like a kid. I remembered that I used to do that with my parents every single time I had the chance, but this time, something different happened. It wasn't just the echo. I could hear a slight, "Hey," coming from somewhere around me. At that moment, I froze. I didn't know if I'd just imagined it or if there was someone else in there with me. I picked up my phone, and even though it was almost midnight, I texted the other security guard. "Hey man, is there someone else here?" I impatiently waited for his response, while looking left and right, feeling anxious. Finally, he responded, saying that it's just me and it must be the echo. I wasn't convinced, but I decided to take his word for it. I said hello a couple more times, but that slight "hey" couldn't be heard. This reinforced my trust in what he had said, and I returned to the office. I sat down and noticed that my coffee mug was on the right side of the desk. I'm left-handed, and I would always place it on the left side. I must be losing my mind, I said while not knowing what was going on. I moved it to the correct side and then started another YouTube video. I was watching a popular creator, and he was doing a series where he reacted to viral funny videos. After that second video where someone fell off a skateboard and landed on a Christmas tree, I heard "ha ha ha" coming from right outside the office. I immediately got up from my chair, waited a bit, and then went out to see what was going on. As I took my first step outside the door, something grabbed me by my leg and I fell flat to my face. "You're new here," I heard a voice coming from behind me. I turned face up and saw a man dressed in all white. He had a knife, so I tried to crawl away from him. "Don't worry, I'll just mark you so that the other one will know I got you first," he whispered menacingly while twirling the knife in the air. What are you talking about? I'm going to call the police right now." I got up and tried to intimidate him, but he just laughed. He was quite skinny, with red dry hair and a lot of small scars on his face and arm. "Call them, they're my best friends," he said while smiling. I didn't know what that meant, but as I tried to go around him and get to my phone, he swung the knife, cutting my jacket and slightly piercing the skin on my arm. "Are you insane?" My voice trembled. At that moment, he got angry. His entire tone of voice changed. "Don't call me insane," he yelled while charging at me with the knife. I managed to put my hands in front of me and grab the handle, but he was pushing so hard that it was hard for me to withstand his attempt at stabbing me. The knife was getting close and closer to my chest. I was trying my hardest to push him back, but it was like he has superhuman strength. All of a sudden, he dropped the knife before falling on his back. Behind him, there was another security guard. "I tried to call you, so I knew that something was wrong," he said while holding a taser. "I thought you were just imagining a voice when you texted me, but the more I thought about it, the more I remembered how much this nut job broke into one of the stores I worked in a couple of years ago. See this scar I have? He's responsible for it." It seems that this guy was in and out of a mental institution, and he even murdered a couple of people up until now. The police were called and they took him away, but he didn't stay locked up long. About a week after that, he was caught yet again trying to break into a house. The police car was patrolling the area when they saw him. I continued to work for the mall for a couple of more weeks, but after that I found a new job, and since then I never worked the night shift again. The plant biology teacher asked us to come to his house in the woods, eventually after months of persuasion. He often spoke about the uniqueness he enjoyed living in the wild and the serene environment, but it looked like a fairy tale as we lived most of our lives in the heart of the city. I was convinced it would be a great time as I carefully selected my friends that would be going there with me after a few of our other classmates had visited. It was a weekend trip, and he had told us not to inform the other students as they only spent a night there, but was willing to accommodate my group of 3 in his home for the weekend, so I was expected to be discreet. At the age of 20, it was my first time leaving the city and driving upstate, though with the help of a GPS live location he shared with me. We drove a rented Hilux van in the steep pathway and parked nearby, not far from the road and a minute walk to his house. "Why would he get a house this far in the woods?" Jeremy asked me as we kept going down the shallow path with dried leaves crushing under our boots. "Isn't it peaceful?" I chuckled. "Aren't you afraid of wild animals?" Jessica whispered, even though it was still evening and there was sunlight peeking through the forest roof. "I'm sure he would have made precautions," I guessed as we arrived at the wooden house. It was built like a modern country home, but with archaic sculptures acting as scarecrows. Immediately we entered what seemed like the front lawn. I saw bird feathers tied to the pillars holding the dwarf fence. I never knew he had any sort of spirituality, but took my eyes off it to avert my friend's attention. "Have you called him?" Jeremy asked behind me as I raised my hand to knock on the door. "Let's knock at least." The door groaned as it opened to us, startling me. "Oh, welcome, guys." His gray beard and blue eyes welcomed us behind the door. We walked in to see him wearing a white robe and a pair of Nike slides with his sole dirty like he had walked on dirt. "Coffee or chocolate?" He chuckled with a broad smile. "Chocolate," I picked up, and so did the rest. "All right, since you guys will be here for the weekend, there's no need to rush things. We would take a walk later in the night and begin the tour tomorrow." His smile broadened. "Is that fine?" "Yes," we echoed and watched him walk into the kitchen. Night came and we prepared to go into the woods as planned. We wore our boots, lamp, and strapped knives and scabbard and began the stroll. A few minutes into the walk, I injured my heel and I was advised to go back. Our teacher was reluctant to let me go alone, but I assured him I could handle it and limped back to the house. When I got to the front door, it was locked, and I remembered I hadn't collected the key, so I went through the back. There was a little garden in the backyard, and as I walked past it, my leg hit something. I took the next limp and kicked something harder. I furiously pointed the lamp to the floor to see what I had hit and found skulls, femurs, and broken ribs shooting out of the earth. I looked around to find out that the whole backyard was a shallow grave. From the distance, I could hear their chuckle as they laughed and giggled back home. Out of fear, I quickly limped away, leaving my friends alone and running for my life. It was the last time I heard from them and the teacher. If only we had known that calling the whole family together to celebrate Thanksgiving was a bad idea, we would have just done it how it usually was with my parents and my 2 siblings. Well, to my mother, what wrong was there in rejoicing with the family? But not every member of the family saw it like that. Some of them saw it as an avenue to revenge for something that a member of the family did to them in the past. The day started out like any other day. We had started the preparation days before, stocking the house with food, drinks, and other things that seemed essential for a family get-together. And since it was Thanksgiving, everything had to go well. Our house was big enough to accommodate everyone, and we didn't have to bother about location. The children had the part allocated to them that they could play in with different toys and whatever they might like. The teenagers, like me, were given our separate place in the house. Our parents said we had a different definition of fun and that they would not want to tap into that. Well, that was good enough for me. I'm not going to be laughing unnecessarily at dry jokes of adults. Everyone arrived that day in a happy mood. If only minds could be read. There was a lot of catching up to do, especially with my cousins. I had missed them so much. The phone didn't do the trick, like a physical meeting would, and it was the one reason I thanked my parents for organizing the Thanksgiving party. I got to see everyone that I had missed again. It had been so long since I last saw them. The first 2 hours passed with just everyone getting to learn things about family members that they had missed, and as girls, the only thing my cousins called interesting enough to talk about were boys. "Man, Joe, you should see him. He's handsome. I have to make sure he notices me. He's too pretty not to have him as mine," one of my cousins had said. Though being a girl comes with being attracted to guys and all that, but I gave up hope on myself. I had never seen a guy attractive enough to make me pour out myself on him, but I was hoping. One day, everyone was happy. Everyone had joy in their hearts and on their faces, except one. One who had it written on his face, but not on his heart. Everything had gone smoothly since the party started, till evening. It was 7 o'clock in the evening and the events were beginning to end when the lights in the house went off suddenly. Dad rushed off to the circuit with the hope that something was probably wrong with one of them. The lights came on again and everyone was calm with the hope that it was just a faulty circuit. It was not until 10 minutes after when the lights went off again and Dad went back to the circuit to be sure he didn't do something wrong the first time he went to the circuit, but the lights refused to come back on this time. The whole room came to light with the family member's phone. Everyone put on their flashlights. At least if the lights would not come on, everyone still had to see what they were doing, one way or the other. When the flashlights came on, everyone noticed someone standing by the door. The person was dressed in all black. His head was down and his hoodie he wore could not give him away as anyone the family members knew. Everyone looked at each other to be sure they were all thinking the same thing. "Hello? Who are you?" My dad's older brother was first to speak. Everyone else added their questions, but the mysterious person did not talk. He didn't even move until my dad spoke.
just like they asked, "Can we help you with something? Do you need something? Why are you standing there and disturbing our family gathering? Who are you?" my dad asked. I could feel his anger on my skin. My dad was not a patient person, and the fact that he had to chat nicely with a stranger who was not giving him any response was throwing him off of his stable point. He moved closer to the stranger, but my mom pulled him back. She was the one that always calmed him down, but this time he was too angry to notice that she even cared about how he was feeling. The stranger walked towards my dad, and before we knew it, blood splashed everywhere and my dad dropped to the floor. "James!" My mother ran to his aid, crying and shouting at the top of her voice. My mom screamed and yelled beside my dad for him to wake up. The stranger got closer to the rest of the family. We moved a step back every time he took a step forward, but that did not stop him from coming close to us. We moved further away from him until we were left with the floor. The only person that didn't care about what the stranger was doing was my mom. She was still trying to raise my dad up. She really believed in miracles. The terrifying thing was that this stranger's head was still down, and with that hoodie, we could not see the face of the person that was attacking us. How could we even tell that this was a human being? There was one thing. Either the stranger just had the body structure of someone I knew, or I actually knew the person. The stranger walked towards my cousins, and without thinking, he cut her with the same axe he used on my dad. This time I cried out, "Why would he have done that?" The stranger then walked towards my younger brother, and while I thought he was going to do the same thing he did to my dad and my cousins, I rushed to him and stumbled him to the ground. He lost his balance and his hoodie fell off his head. A black mask was on his face, and with the anger that was in me, I pulled the mask off. Under the mask was the face that hurt two of my family members, the face that we all thought was dead 3 years ago, the face of Uncle M, my long-lost cousin whom the family hated for the murder attempt he tried on my grandparents then.
The feeling of betrayal that I felt made me feel as though I had been stupid all along and blind to what was hidden in plain sight. Betrayal was probably not so bad if it wasn't someone you didn't expect it from, someone like my best friend. I slammed another donut on the table, hoping slamming so much would make me feel better, but it didn't. As a matter of fact, it felt as though it made it worse, or it was just constant and nothing changed. I didn't know what made me think eating donuts was the best option in the situation. My best friend and I loved Dunkin' Donuts, and we would always order from there every Friday. It was Thursday, but I pushed myself to enjoy something I cherished with her. I checked the time, and it was 6 in the night. I was alone in my room. My best friend was not back, probably because of guilt, but I couldn't exactly blame her. It was still her fault. She should feel the guilt, more than she can take if it was possible. I picked up my jacket and left the room, deciding not to lock it in case she came around to pick up a few things. I was that nice. Taking walks was another thing that helped me. Hopefully, it was going to walk more than the donuts. I smiled to some of my classmates on the way and some other friends that I somehow had, thanks to Layla, my best friend. She was the social person, dragging me along with her to every occasion just because I was lonely, according to her, and I needed adventure. I decided against using AirPods. I wanted to have the full feeling of nature through all of my body. To me, nothing could be compared to the feeling that was gotten from it. It just had to be the best. At one point, I jogged twice around the building that was big enough and only stopped when I felt energized. I decided to go back to my room when I checked the time, and it was already 8 o'clock in the night. Shoot, I don't like walking late at night. Being alone makes it worse. I ignored the heavy feeling in my chest and the thoughts in my head. I've had my share of experiences walking late at night, and it was something that was clearly not for me. I had always run from it, except I had someone with me, which was still traumatic enough. I looked back continuously to be sure nothing was behind me while I prayed silently that nothing was going to come out of nowhere. "Happy birthday, Marlene," I heard a mocking voice behind me. I jumped 2 steps ahead before eventually looking back. There was no one there. I shook my head to be sure I was not just imagining things, which was kind of hard since I couldn't relax until I got to my room and was sure that I wasn't actually being tormented. I ran as fast as I could, hoping to get back to my hostel just in time to forget all that was happening. If it was real or not was not my business, as long as I was safe. Hopefully. Come on, Marlene, let's sing a birthday song. It's going to be nice. It's your birthday after all. The voice was closer this time. Too close, in fact. I continued running. It felt even too real to doubt it. I was quite sure it wasn't in my head. My heart was beating very fast, and I could feel it almost fall off my chest, thanks to the ribs and skin protecting it somehow. Stop, please, I begged whatever it was. I couldn't see it, but it was supposed to take my plea somehow. I didn't remember offending anyone or anything, or going out to hunt anything, or place of any sort. The fact that someone was chasing me and even knew my name was a shock. It wasn't even my birthday. I could see the dorm very close to me. I was calling out to my room as if it had legs and arms that could carry me. Shockingly, no student was outside. I knew the students of my college too well. 8 at night was still morning to them. There were so many activities at night that a stranger wouldn't tell if it was actually classes or normal school activities, except that it was dark. Marlene. The voice dragged my name slowly and quietly and felt too close. I heard footsteps behind me, which made me think it was a prank, but every time I turned back to check, there was no one there or any clue that could tell me who it was. Suddenly, I felt a pair of hands around me, strong arms that held me very close. I refused to turn to check whoever or whatever it was, in fear of whatever I might see. No birthday, huh? I froze when I realized who it was. I turned back in anger, took a long stare at her, and walked away. Marlene, I'm sorry. She ran after me. Layla, sorry is not going to change the fact that you slept with my boyfriend. You weren't sorry then. Why should you be sorry now? She looked at me with remorse, the puppy eyes that always had an effect on me, but it was different this time. I was not ready to hear whatever she had to say, and I for sure wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. She could have the guy if she wanted to. I couldn't care less. What else can I say aside from sorry? She tried to move closer to me, but I took 2 steps away from her. Exactly. Don't say anything. I don't want to hear it. You're so mean and insensitive, taking my boyfriend for yourself and using my weakness against me. Fear of creepy things. Bye, Layla. We are no longer friends from now on. Don't try to talk to me or anything like that. Call me dramatic, but whatever. I wished to be more than dramatic. I had to make her see that I was hurt, and if I didn't try to, I was going to be a dullard in their sight, and I couldn't have someone describing me like that. Never. I got back to my room and eventually ate the donuts that were left in the carton. I might as well console myself with something. My money couldn't exactly go to waste. I had to eat it. I searched for different shows on Netflix before deciding on a medical series to watch. What better way to end the day than with a medical show? I know I had to deal with the mixed feelings I was having, but I pushed it to the side. I was going to deal with it later. I could not break my own heart with unnecessary thoughts. Life is definitely sweeter and better when it's just you. I smiled weakly before pressing play on my laptop.